Welcome everyone. Thank you all for logging on to the Australian Institute for Commercialisation's webinar, Market Research for Innovators and Entrepreneurs. This is one of a series of webinars supported by the Queensland Government, Department of Science, ICT, Innovation and the Arts, and Cure My Solutions. Our presenter today is Sean Smith. Sean, welcome. We're all keen to know what you have for us today.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. I can see almost 60 people already, so fantastic turnout. For those of you who are new to the webinar format, I'll just give you a few pointers now on how you can participate and interact in this webinar. First of all, this is what your console will look like here for you to participate. If you do have any problems, any technical issues hearing me, you can actually switch very quickly between your computer, mic and speakers, and telephone. You can just use this link here, click on this to switch to a toll-free number, and the details will appear. Secondly, you're all in listen-only mode at the moment, but I would invite you to participate by either typing your comments and questions throughout the webinar, and we'll address those either during the webinar or at the end. And secondly, there's another feature here. You can actually raise your hand if you're having any issues. And I would invite everyone right now to click on their hand button and raise their hand, just so that I can see that you're all there and hearing me. Okay, fantastic. Looks like everybody has got that one. Now, just to give you a few pointers about just to give you a bit of information to begin with. We are the Australian Institute for Commercialisation, the AIC, and people generally come to us for assistance with innovation. So that could be new products, new markets, collaboration, so collaborating with other businesses or working with research organisations, or commercialisation, so assistance in commercialising new opportunities. We're a private, not-for-profit consultancy, and we've been around for 10 years. I myself have been lucky enough to work with the AIC for the past 3.5 years, and I manage our market research service here. In that time, I've worked with some fantastically innovative companies. I've done market research for over 100 companies in just about every industry sector, including clean technology, manufacturing, tourism, and my background before I started doing this was, in fact, medical research. So I came from a technical lab setting. I worked for Ian Fraser, who is a very successful innovator in his own right, and I'll comment on a few of the differences between full-blown scientific research and market research later. Now at this point, you know a bit about me. I'd like to find out a little bit about everyone out there who's listening. So what I'm going to do is launch a poll, just an interactive poll that's going to pop up on your computer screen. So I'll do that now. And I'd like you to answer the question, which of the following best describes you? Are you part of an established business with a new product or service? Are you an entrepreneur or inventor? Or are you neither of those things and just interested in learning more? So I'll give you a few moments there to do that. Okay, fantastic. I will close off the voting now, so I appreciate that. And I'll just share the results with you. So you can see who we've got out here today. We've got quite a few people from established businesses, quite a few entrepreneurs, and then less people who are just interested in learning. So that gives me a really good idea of who's out there. Now in terms of what we're going to cover, market research is a broad topic. I could talk about this all day, so I'm just going to give you some really basic fundamental information and hopefully some info that you can take away with you that will give you the practical ability to go out there and do your own market research. However, if after this webinar there are any areas where you're unsure about or you would like more information or assistance, I'd encourage you to get in touch. I'll share my email and phone number with you, so feel free to give me a call by all means. So I'm going to start out with an intro and a few definitions and so on, and then I'm going to tell you 7 things that I wish someone had told me when I started market research, and some fundamental but helpful info there. Then I'm going to present you with a bit of a guide, a DIY, do-it-yourself market research guide, and finally we're going to have a question and answer session. So I plan to leave at least 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. There should be plenty of time for that, but feel free to type in your questions during the webinar as well. Now, to get started, why market research? I could just have easily called this market research for decision making, because quite frankly, if you're not using your market research to drive decision making or to inform you, then really there's not much point in doing it. So particularly in the case of the entrepreneur or the innovator, I guess established businesses often have markets in which they're very comfortable, but by definition entrepreneurs and innovators are going into markets where they are new to those markets, where they may not be comfortable, and they're working in areas of uncertainty. So you really need to be comfortable to research that market and get as much insights as you can before going into it. So you can use market research to make a decision if your idea is feasible. You can use it to decide where, when, how, and to whom you will launch your new product or new venture, for that matter. Investors will use market research to make a decision whether to invest in you, which is very important. Also, market research can inform you. Knowledge is power. It can inform your negotiations. It can inform your financial models, and it can help you to identify competitors and potential partners for your venture. So we've got a lovely fish here, and I'll use the example of someone fishing in a pond in terms of what questions we can ask with market research. You might want to know how many fish are in your pond, how big is the market, will the fish like the bait, will they like your product, and if so, how much will they like it? Do the fish prefer your bait or someone else's bait? And who are the other fishermen? So who are your competitors? And finally, is the pond being overfished? Are you in a growing market or alternatively a shrinking market? And just a few definitions. Qualitative and versus quantitative is an important distinction. Quantitative obviously deals with things that you can quantify, numbers, hard figures, whereas qualitative, on the other hand, is more about thoughts, feelings, opinions, and so on. Primary market research versus secondary market research. So primary research is really gathering new information for a specific purpose at hand. So effectively doing the research yourself. Secondary market research requires using information that already exists elsewhere. So you're using information that someone else has collected for another purpose, like publicly available government data, for example. And finally, B2B, business to business, or B2C, business to consumer markets. Whether you are selling a product to businesses or consumers is an important distinction. And by consumer, I mean such as a fast food chain, something like that. That will affect the way that you conduct market research and the kinds of questions you're asking, and really the information that you'll have about your customers. Now, to get started, I obviously started market research with the AIC. I had done some of it before then, but here's a few things that I wish I would tell myself if I went back, if you like. And look, I apologise if some of this does seem a little basic, but it's very fundamental, and I think it's a good place to start. First of all, display your market research visually. So the people that will read your market research are time poor. Particularly in the case of investors, you really can't expect people to read more than a 1 or 2 page executive summary of your research in the first instance. And if they are interested, and only if they're interested in this initial summary, will they delve into further detail. So your ability to display your market research information visually, I think, really helps you to summarise it succinctly and communicate it. And I've used an example here of actually a little bit of research I've done on today's webinar. So you can see here the locations of all of our webinar attendees for this particular webinar. We've got people in Brisbane, throughout Queensland, and all over the country. So I think I could have shown you a spreadsheet of this information, but really to make the impact and get the point across, displaying it visually is the only way. I'll give you another example here of some market research that I've done for a client. This is a solar installer, someone who installs solar panels on roofs of domestic houses. Now, they were looking at understanding where they should be targeting their sales effort, this product. What we were able to find with publicly available information is this heat map, if you like, of suburbs and the number of photovoltaic PV solar connections per 1,000 dwellings. So you can see the cool suburbs where there's not so many dwellings, and the hot solar suburbs where there are a number of people who, quite a few people who have solar. So using this information, again, I mean, it wouldn't have meant a lot just displayed in a table, but visually this combined with some other information really helped them to decide where the hot solar suburbs were and where they should be targeting their sales effort. Point number 2, you start with publicly available information, and I'll extend that to say start with secondary market research as well. So there are a number of private market research databases that you can use. Now these are really expensive. Typically you'll pay between $900 and $10,000 per report. And my experience says that generally your expectations of what you'll get from such a report are actually higher than what you actually get. You can often be disappointed. I suggest starting with publicly available information, saving your money. At the moment there's a huge trend towards open data. This logo here I've got is the Australian Federal Government's Open Data Initiative, and also obviously the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Similarly, the Queensland Government has an Open Data Initiative. The ASX Stock Exchange can be really useful for finding out information about publicly listed companies. Really, private companies can be as private as they like, but public companies do have an obligation to provide a lot of detail to the public. So there's a huge amount of information out there. It's really growing a lot at the moment, and you should really start with publicly available information. I've got an example here of some good information that we've been able to get for someone that has been publicly available that they've used to inform their business decisions. So this is the case of an Australian manufacturer of water heater products. Now this particular water heater they were looking to export to the United States, and it was far more efficient than electric and diesel water heaters, but just didn't compete well with natural gas heaters. So the research question they were asking is, which US state does not have an extensive natural gas network? Which markets should I be targeting? Now we found some publicly available information from US Department of Energy and the Energy Information Association, I believe, detailing exactly what proportion of houses had gas and electric heating, and this helped the company to decide that they should be targeting states like Florida, where there was a large proportion of houses that used electric heating, where their product would be competitive. So another example of how useful publicly available information can be to you. Point number 3, set clear objectives and follow them through. One thing that we do when we start working with a new market research client is we give them what we call a market research request form. Now, I've got on this slide here some of the questions that we'll put in this request form. And this is as much for the client as it is for us. Really, having a clear idea in your head of the questions that you're asking about the market and the objectives for what you want to do with the market research information will help you to avoid getting lost, if you like, in the expansive amount of information that's out there. So the point I want to get across here is that you can have a go yourself. Market research isn't hard, but ask simple questions about the market. Ask no more than 3, and you'll get relevant results. And down here I've got an example of the scientific process, if you like. Now, coming from a research background, scientific research background myself, often we'll start with a hypothesis, proceed to an experiment, get some results and analyse those results and reach a conclusion. Although market research isn't, let's say, a scientific process, you can still use this process. You can still come up with a hypothesis about the market and use research to test that hypothesis. Point number 4, perhaps a bit controversial, there is no right way to do market research. I would suggest that if you engage 5 different market research consultants, professionals, you're likely to get 5 different approaches to how to conduct your research. it's not an exact science. It does rely on experience and I guess to interpret, but my key point again is that it's not difficult. Research isn't difficult. Have a go yourself before you engage a professional, and it's often beneficial if you have started doing your own market research before you go along to see a consultant such as us. I would suggest using a consultant when things get more complicated. For example, when you start doing primary market research, you may want some expertise there, perhaps particularly around focus groups, surveys, and so on. Point number 5, don't do only secondary market research. And for that matter, don't do only primary market research either. As I said, it's best to start with secondary market research. Firstly, it's a lot cheaper than conducting primary research, and secondary market research can help you to define your problem and objectives, making your primary research more effective, if you like. I've got a few tools here that you can use. So Survey Gizmo and SurveyMonkey are online survey tools, and in fact we will be sending out after this webinar a SurveyMonkey asking you how you found it, and a few points on designing surveys. I would say, sorry, I've jumped ahead a little bit there. Design your surveys with the analysis of the surveys in mind. So the more quantitative you can make the questions, for example, a sliding scale rather than of asking people how they found the webinar from 1 to 10 rather than simply an open-ended question, is really going to help you to analyse it. Be conscious also of the requirements if you're trying to investigate a statistically significant sample of your customer base. Be aware of the statistical expertise you'll need in that case, and sample size numbers and so on. But often you can get some really good survey information without too huge samples. And I've got another tool here that you may be familiar with, the telephone. I would suggest you all pick up the telephone and conduct some primary research. Give people a call. I'm reminded of a case where I was doing some market research for, which I'll talk about later, for investigating numbers of tourists in far north Queensland for a new attraction in that area. And we got a huge amount of information from Great Barrier Marine Park visitors. We got the Coranda rail numbers and so on. But it wasn't until I actually picked up the phone and I ended up talking to the marketing manager of another attraction in the area that I got some incredible insights into the dynamics of the market, into what a typical package tour from China might look like going to far north Queensland. You'd be amazed at the specific information you can get by stepping from secondary to primary research. Number 6, build your online search skills. I know you're all aware, but we are currently going through an information explosion. I've got a nice little graphic here of a man standing next to what would be the size of a printed version of Wikipedia. The issue for businesses at the moment is not that there's not enough information, it's that there's too much information. The quantity is unprecedented. So it's important, number 1, to set your research objectives clearly, as we said before, but also Google Advanced Search is your friend. Get better at doing online searches. It's really going to help you to pull out the most relevant information. And practice makes perfect in this case, but there's a few little tricks. For example, you can search for a particular file type. I'll often search for PDF files specifically, which will help to filter out a lot of the garbage that you might otherwise get. And point number 7, be creative about collecting information. In this digital age, there's just so many sources of information about your customers, and you may not be using all of them to your full potential. I've got a nice little case study here of a good friend of the AIC who has developed an app game called Rugby League Legends. Now, this is an iPhone game, effectively a rugby league video game, and the information we've got here is from his Facebook page for that product. Now, this is only the people that have liked his Facebook page. You can see here the demographic is skewed, of his customers is skewed towards men, 89% of them in fact. You've got 39% are 13 to 17-year-old men, and 32% of them are 18 to 24-year-old men. So these guys are coming from mainly Sydney and Brisbane. No big surprises there, I can imagine. It's rugby league. But my point really is that this kind of information about the demographic was available on his Facebook page. It's been really useful to him, and I know a lot of businesses out there have the Facebook page, perhaps don't use this information to its full potential. Again, I would suggest following the process we spoke about before, setting clear research objectives before you look at how this data can be useful to you, but be creative. And I've got another example from the same game, that Rugby League Legends. This is from the iPhone App Store, and this shows you where people are purchasing his app. And you might not have expected that people would be buying a rugby league app in, say, Brazil or Turkey, but they are. And this kind of information is really useful in deciding where he would advertise this product, but also if he were to translate the game into a different language, what he might need to be looking at there. Now, we're not all in the app market, but there are an enormous number of online data sources available to us. Too many for me to go through here. Really investigate the avenues available to you and look at products like Google Analytics. There are some really good products out there for making sense of this online market data. So there you have it. Those are the seven questions, 7 points, if you like, that I would tell myself before going into market research. I might pause it there. Rob, did we have any questions at this stage that the audience is throwing out?
There's a couple of questions that have come through, and one is actually in the business-to-business realm.
Yes.
What sort of research resources are best for marketing to another business rather than marketing to the public?
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's a good question. There are one of the paid market research databases that I would recommend for people if they're looking at trying out perhaps their first market research database is Ibis World. I'm not sure if you've come across it before, but that often has a really good display of market share distribution. I'm just finding, I do actually have a slide here that I've found. Now this is a typical market share distribution that you might find in an Ibis World report. In this case, it's actually for this image down here. It's for the Australian wine industry, and it'll show you the percentage market share of each of the major players in this industry. So Ibis World reports are typically not too expensive. They can be a good place to start. And look, that could be good for you if you're interested in identifying your competitors and so forth. Another really interesting area for B2B transactions I find is in fact LinkedIn. Now there's an enormous amount of info that people generate themselves and put up on LinkedIn about where they work and so on, and look, it can be a good source of just identifying contacts and information about businesses as well, just to name a couple. Were there any others, Rob?
Another one was actually about doing market research for getting finance and wondering what investors are looking for in market research. Is there anything?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk about this shortly, but investors, in fact, are often looking at particularly if you're an entrepreneur going for, let's say, angel investment or growth investment, if you like, investors will typically be looking for the assumptions that underpin your financial models. So let's say you've prepared a business plan that shows a particular trajectory for your business. They'll really want to understand what underpins that, what data you've got to back up what you say, and you know, elements like the size of the market, the growth of the market, that will help investors to determine if it's the right opportunity for them. But thanks for those questions and keep them coming through. I might just continue on with the webinar and we'll address a few more questions later on. So thanks for that, Rob.
Very good.
So here we go for a basic process for doing market research, how to go about it yourself. As I said, step 1, set your objectives. 2, plan your method. 3, do your research. And 4, process the information. And I'll go through that step by step now. So firstly, remember what I said before, because of the large amount of info, set your objectives early, and that can help you to avoid wasting time. I would suggest even trying to sum up your problem in one sentence. For example, is there a large enough market to support my dog wash business in Brisbane, for example? You should have no more than 3 research objectives, otherwise it can get complicated and you can lose the detail. For example, how many people in Brisbane own dogs might be one question you could ask. How many existing dog wash companies service Brisbane? And how well do the existing companies service the consumers in Brisbane? So set your objectives. Secondly, start to think about where you're going to find this information. So it's best to start with secondary research, as I've said. It's cheaper and it helps you to set the direction of your more resource-intensive primary research. Always take into account the validity of the information sources that you're looking at. The academic literature is peer-reviewed and there's a lot of rigour around it, but market research information can be written by anyone. Pay careful attention to when it was written as well, how up-to-date it is. There's a huge variability out there in terms of quality of information, as I'm sure many of you will have already found. Try and determine if it's a trustworthy source, if you like. We've got the points here we discussed before on primary and secondary research. Step 3, go ahead and do the research. Now, we discussed some of the online search tools like Google, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, third-party providers of information, so ABS, industry associations can be very useful. Commercially available databases such as IBISWorld, even patent search databases if you're in a high-tech field. And then you've got the option of consultants such as ourselves, third-party providers. And then obviously primary market research, surveys, face-to-face, focus groups, and so on. And process the information. That's the final step, obviously, and there's a number of different frameworks you can use for this. I've used a pretty traditional one here, the SWOT methodology: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this could be useful, for example, if you were looking at your business's strategy. You might investigate your market and categorise what information you find into these quadrants, identifying those strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities that you see and threats and so on. But look, there's a number of other frameworks you can use, and it's really going to be specific to the questions you're asking and the nature of your business. I've got a list of online market research resources here, and in fact, we're going to be sending out this afternoon, after this webinar, a link helping you access all these slides. So don't worry about writing these down. We're going to send them to you. Obviously, Google Advanced Searches are useful too. Particularly for the entrepreneurs and inventors out there, I would highly recommend the Queensland Inventors Service. Now, that's something that we here at the AIC actually run, and I'll ask Rob to share that link with you if you want to check it out. There's some good guides up there that can give you further information about doing market research and all other aspects of starting a new business or a new venture. Google Scholar is a good source for academic articles, and we've gone through some of these other tools as well already. Okay, at this point we've covered a fair bit of information already about market research and how to go about it. And at this point, I would like to talk about some case studies, some more in-depth examples of when we've done market research for clients and how we went about it. So with this example, I think if there ever was an example of how market research has helped an entrepreneur move from idea to multi-million-dollar reality, this is it, the Cairns Aquarium project. We worked with an entrepreneur by the name of Daniel Leitnick. Daniel was already a successful manager of a manufacturing company based in Melbourne at the point where he moved to Cairns. Now he saw an opportunity, he thought he saw an opportunity in Cairns to open a new tourist attraction in the form of an aquarium. So Daniel's used this process, this market research process, to move from just the business concept to progressing his idea, to making it a reality. And as we spoke about earlier, he set his research objectives to begin with, and we did this with him. So first of all, we asked the question, does an opportunity exist for a major tourism attraction in Cairns in the form of an aquarium? And secondly, how many visitors might we expect at such an attraction? So that information could be used to model how much money the venture might make. Now, in terms of the information that we identified in planning the research that we wanted to gather, we really wanted to look at tourism figures in the region, trends in the industry, specifically demographics of the market, the size of the market, the size of the opportunity, the success of other similar businesses, and data about potential customers. So those are all the elements that we identified that we wanted to learn. And how did we do this? So I have been focusing so far on publicly available information. And in this case was no exception. We started with secondary research and we started with publicly available information. So we looked at the Great Barrier Marine Park Authority. That gave us the number of visitors to the marine park. We looked also at the CRC, the Cooperative Research Centre for the reef. This gave us profiles on the visitors that were visiting the reef. We looked at the Townsville Aquarium, so that's part owned by the Queensland Government, and they publish all of the information they have on their visitor numbers and also the profile of visitors. Finally, the Kuranda Scenic Rail is part owned by Queensland Rail, and they in fact publish information on the total number of visitors. So that's all of the secondary information we collected and other info as well. And as I said before, it really wasn't until I started calling other attractions and talking to market research managers and doing that primary research that I gained some even more valuable insights about the market there. So we used all of that info to estimate the total market size available to the venture, total number of, and forecast the likely number of visitors to such an attraction to model that information. And so there's a recurring theme here, obviously, in that the government is in some ways associated with all of the organisations that we got secondary market research from, and because of the public involvement, the information is publicly available. Now, how did we use the information? Well, it helped the entrepreneur to confirm that he was on the right track, that he was, that he did have a viable idea and it was worth investing in. Also, it helped him to avoid the unprofitable idea. So entrepreneurs often have 100 ideas for every one that they execute, and market research helps to really cull those other ideas. This market research information was communicated to government and investors, and in fact helped to attract funding to the venture. So where has it gone now? This is now looking to be a $40 million world-class attraction. It's going to open in July 2016 and on a 4,000 square metre site in the Cairns CBD. And the information from the market research actually went in as part of the information memorandum that went out to investors. And that's being used to attract the funding. So that's where it's gone. Now at this point, we've got Rob Geddes here facilitating the webinar, and Rob Geddes is our designer in residence here at the AIC. Rob, you've got over 30 years experience in the design industry, specifically with PROdesign, a multidisciplinary design practice, and I think we need to draw on some of your learnings in that industry and how you've used market research in your experience. So
yeah, sure.
Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the case study that we've got here up in front of us.
Yes, this was actually an interesting one, and as you mentioned, over 30 years, there's quite a lot of instances where we had market research used, and that informed the designing of the products that we took to the marketplace. So it's a very, very useful thing to take along to your designers so that they can actually be designing the right thing and spending their time and money and efforts coming up with the winning product based on your research. So it's actually a wonderful thing. This one was actually a joint venture company, a new joint venture between a company based in France that had operations in the UK and manufacturing facilities themselves in China, doing a joint venture with an Australian company who had their head office in Sydney. And they were looking to break into the Australian market for light switches and power points and things like that, but needed to understand whether it was actually worthwhile doing so beforehand. So they not only contracted designers to design the products, but market researchers, a market research firm, to look into the research, look into the opportunity that may or may not have been there. And so they actually conducted quite a lot of secondary research, but then dove in quite quickly then to primary research to actually speak to people on the ground who would be making the decisions.
So I've got some pictures up here, Rob.
Yeah, some of the early sketches.
Tell me about this. This is the concept development phase that you went through with your client company.
No, absolutely. So very early on, just getting a feel for what the opportunities might be, and doing really quick concept sketches and understanding the opportunity and putting that in front of the client.
So tell me, once you had developed this concept as a designer, how did you then approach the market and do research on whether or not the market would be interested in this product?
It was known that the market was actually owned at that stage by two incumbents. There were two major companies that had effectively 95% of the market share of the whole of Australia, a stranglehold, like a two-airline policy or whatever it might be. And you can see parallels these days in other industries. And they were worried that that was actually going to lock them out of the marketplace, so they had to find out whether or not people would buy a product from them. So they conducted two rounds of research. One was just finding out background about the industry, how the current situation operated. In the next round, they actually took some of the designs that we put forwards and put them in front of people and got their feedback.
So how did you? So you actually made models of the.
At this stage, they're actually just CAD renderings, so computer models, and the visuals from a CAD system these days can actually be virtual reality, and so people can visualize what the product is going to look like, even though it hasn't yet been built. But we did later on produce rapid prototypes from these CAD models, which we put in the hands of potential buyers, the early adopters, for example, and the major volume purchasers of the product, to find out what their reactions were, give them actual physical samples in their hand. But here there was just 5 renderings of the major, while there were 97 products in the range that they had to launch on day one, the biggest volume seller was a double PowerPoint.
Right.
Out of all of them, out of all the light switches and all the PowerPoints and all of the fancy sockets that you might have, the majority of products sold in this product range was the double PowerPoint. So that was the flagship product, I suppose. And we got feedback from not only the electrical contractors who made most of the buying decisions in the marketplace, who would actually decide whether to buy this brand or that brand, but we put it into a focus group with interior designers, interior decorators, people who would actually specify a design. So they weren't purchasing. They weren't the ones actually forking out money, but they were actually making a decision and putting a specification on the drawings for somebody else to buy the product. So here were two quite different groups of people. As well as that, we also brought in members of the general public to just see what the general response was.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, that's a really good example of a couple of things actually, and you're reminding me of some projects we've worked on where, as part of a primary market research survey that we've done, we actually sent out a sample of the product before the survey, so people can touch and feel your product and then give you some feedback on that. You know, with technologies like rapid prototyping, 3D printing, and so on, it is really really feasible to do something like that.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend it. It's something that's able to be done now in so many different areas. We can even rapid prototype food these days. There's so many different technologies and options out there. Get something physical into the hands of the people who are going to make decisions, and they will quickly give you a response.
Yeah, okay. And just on this focus group point, I think obviously focus groups can be a really great source of primary market research information. You can get some really valuable insights as to what people think of your product. But I would say, you know, particularly facilitating a focus group is quite a specific skill set, quite an advanced skill set, and you obviously in this case went and used professionals for that.
We used professionals for that with the full one-way mirrors and video recordings and all those sorts of things. And often it's important just looking at the way people respond in their gestures and their facial impressions and what they look at first and things, and you can analyse that on the video later on as well. So it's a very, very useful tool. Although you need to do it multiple times because strong personalities can actually lead a market research group. So that's why you do need the professionals in there to do it well.
So I mean, I'll make the point that focus groups are not something that we do here at the ourselves at the AIC, although we are aware of companies that can do that, and some research facilities actually have that capability as well. But I guess this demonstrates the fact that you can really blend doing part of your market research yourself and using professionals for part of it as well. It doesn't need to be an either or, and I think I really would encourage everyone to give it a go themselves first. Absolutely. Well, look, that just about draws. Yeah. Sorry, you're going to say something?
No, it's just we have a couple of questions coming through.
Oh, great. Okay.
One here from Vern Johnson. In your opinion, is it worth joining industry bodies to access quantitative secondary research? So is it worth paying the joining fees?
Yeah, sure. I guess that's really going to depend on your individual situation, how much it costs to join, and exactly what information you're paying for. There's a lot of industry associations out there that will have member databases for free, freely available on their website, so you don't need to join all of them. But yeah, I think in any scenario where you're considering paying for market research information, really just you really just want to get a better idea, as good an idea as possible of the information you're going to get. Often companies will give you free samples or pages, bits and pieces here and there, and then just do your own sort of little return on investment analysis, if you like, and just see if you're going to get the benefit from that information. So yeah, may or may not be, depends. I'll just before we move, Rob, to the rest of those questions, I'll just do a quick note on our next webinar. So thank you everyone for attending today, and we'll have more question and answers in a minute. But if you are interested in learning more about the new product development process, and in particular Agile new product development, we've got a webinar that's going to be on next Thursday, the 11th of September. Same time, around lunchtime, and Rob, you'll be presenting this one.
Yes.
With Gerard Ryan, and also a product development expert. And this is a really good next step, I guess, once you've learned a bit more about market research, to then look at how that feeds into your new product development process.
No, that's good. You'd all be most welcome to join in on that.
So yeah, we'll be sending around, in fact, a link to that webinar with the follow-up email for this webinar this afternoon. So it should be very easy for you all to join that one. So I'll just close it off there and invite questions. And just before I do go to the questions, I'd like to acknowledge again the support of the Queensland Government, Department of Science, Information Technology, Innovation and the Arts for supporting this webinar. So.
No, that's very good. It's part of a series of webinars, and you'll be informed now that you've registered for this one. You'll certainly get notification of all the other webinars as they come through. So that's good. Yes, Sean, we do have some questions here. There's one here, Grant Thompson. What's the best way to research design type preferences in a business to consumer market? So best. Okay.
I might even deflect this one off to you, Rob, actually, with your design experience. I mean, I guess my comments on that would be you want to identify the demographic that you're targeting with your product, and in consumer markets there can often be some secondary information already available that tells you what the preferences of the market are. I mean, yes. You, Rob, always use the example of TripAdvisor and what have you. For businesses in the tourism industry.
Yes, it's worth its weight in gold. You're getting constant feedback, even though it can be the bane of existence of operators if they're doing something not quite up to expectation.
Yeah, so in that sense, I would suggest start with secondary research. Obviously, it depends on your market as to what information is going to be available, and then I would move to primary research. And obviously, we've spoken about a lot of the tools you can use for primary research, like surveys and like our second case study with sending examples. But Rob, you have got some other tools I'm aware of in terms of really honing in on consumer preferences as well.
Yeah, there's a number of very specific, and basically they are sort of research tools used in conjunction with design presentations. So you present the designs to people, and getting as quickly as you can to some form of image and a range of different images so that people can select amongst them. So when you're going through a concept stage, have a range from quite radical concepts right through to quite conservative concepts based on your research, your secondary research into what the trends are in the industry. Trends in terms of technology, trends in terms of the visuals, what's the design styling like in this particular area, etc.
And sorry, I was going to say I'll provide a link also to our YouTube channel. We have in the past run a webinar on deep customer insights, which is, I guess it's almost parallel to the traditional market research I've been talking about. There are some good design tools available to you, so I'll present that.
No, that's right. These are often tools that the designers are looking to use to inform the physical form and shape and style, I suppose, of the object and what the features and benefits might be in there, rather than the numbers, which is a large part of what the upfront market research is for the business case. So once the business case has been established, what is that design going to be like? What is the best design? And do we target it to a specific niche so that we are very, very good at satisfying a niche that has particular needs, or do we try to make it as generic as possible to satisfy as wide a market as possible, but not be very focused on one particular niche and not be overly targeted towards a particular niche? So that's there's some very good tools there, and prototyping, getting a prototype in people's hands. Often the image that you have in your mind, you can't convey that to a client. You actually need to put a mock-up of the product in front of them.
Okay. So any more questions there, Rob?
Yeah, there's quite a number. We have one here, a very specific solution, looking for a definitive list of how many there are in Australia and New Zealand. And so it's the particular market area here is a particular type of radio users.
Trunked radio, P25 trunk. Thanks for the question, Murray. I'm not familiar with your specific situation. However, you do remind me of something, a research project we did recently, which was looking at, in fact, 3D printing. We had a client that was very interested in knowing exactly the number of 3D printing machines of a particular type that were available in Australia. So this is really specific information. Now, the way that we actually were able to get that information was not through secondary research. It was really only through primary research with people who were really familiar with the industry. We actually ended up using a research expert, a number of research experts who just know the market. And I'd say for your situation, it's going to be the same scenario. You're really going to need to find people who are in that market and who really have that expertise. I can't suggest any other way of getting that very specific market information.
And we have another one here about looking at internet search engines and looking at the global demographic and what searches are being done on internet search engines.
Is there a way to find the global demographic product searches done by internet search engines? Yeah, thanks for the question, Roseanne. Short answer is no, not that I'm aware of. Search engines There is a site called Google Trends that will give you information on information on what searches are particularly popular at the moment. It can also, for a given search, give you an idea of how many times it's being searched per day and in what location. In terms of demographic information, no. I think social media like Facebook and LinkedIn are probably more useful for that, purely because the users themselves actually have to fill in all of that demographic information when they're using the service. Search engines generally don't, I'm not going to say don't have that information, but certainly don't make it available to you.
Yep. No, that's good.
It's a good question.
Another one here is about phrasing the research questions. That seems to be very important when you're conducting your surveys. How do you, are there any guidelines about how do you phrase a question, whether it be open-ended or?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really important one. And there's no hard and fast correct answer to that. We'll often use really open-ended questions in our surveys. But the more open-ended a question is, the more you're going to get the qualitative data, the thoughts and opinions, if you like. If you do want quantitative data, you're going to have to put the question in a format where you can actually quantify the answer. Yeah. I think purely for the purposes of analysis, it's much easier, particularly with big surveys, if you have more quantitative information. But if you're just surveying a few people and you're looking for really, and you know, these might be people like chief executives of a business or something like that, you might really be wanting to just understand their insights in the market. And in that case, you would phrase the question as a very open-ended market research question.
And Sean, I'll jump in there as well. I think keeping it very quantitative is very good for the business case up front. But designers actually love those qualitative responses as well. Often in there you'll find a pearl. Somebody will come up with some response that actually then gives you the insight to be able to develop something that's new and novel in the marketplace. So it's actually different uses for the different types of research. So that's very, very interesting. So, another one here, how do I get the right branding name for a successful launch of a product? Well,
no, that's a good question, Ian. And you've touched on, I think, an important difference there between market research and marketing itself. So market research will provide you with the information to make the decision on brand. However, the nature of that decision is really a marketing decision. So you can use all the information, but really it's a different skill set, branding, I would say. Have you got any comment on that, Rob?
I certainly agree.
And there are obviously branding experts that you can talk to about that.
Yes, and I've seen seen market research done once there's perhaps a selection of options for branding to test whether or not one option is going to get more traction than another option. But in gathering information ahead of developing a brand, you won't get a lot of information out of market research. You really need to do the hard yards yourself there.
Yep.
And it's quite a different discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. Just another question here coming from Carl, and I think this is a good one actually. He says, when calling business-to-business professionals to ask questions for primary research, do you have any pointers to help a more receptive welcome on the phone? And look, that's great. I mean, that's something that we do all the time. And you can get a variety of perceptions when you're conducting market research. I mean, everyone out there knows how you feel when you're at home at 7 p.m. and someone calls you to ask for your opinion.
Or at work, for that matter.
Or at work, for that matter.
So how do you cut through the gatekeepers?
Well, that's another question. I would say even the gatekeepers is another question. But look, I find generally people are pretty receptive to phone calls asking for market information. Generally, in terms of actually calling people, the process of doing that, I would say you've really got to be honest and upfront about what you're trying to achieve. So don't try and trick people into answering questions for you. I'd say you've got a sort of 10-second window when they answer the phone to introduce yourself, say what you're trying to achieve and why, as professionally as possible. And I find generally, if you get your point across and if you're honest, and people are quite receptive to receiving those kind of requests for information. People generally want to help you. You've got to realise that you are asking for assistance, and people generally want to help you. But also be prepared for a few knockbacks, I would say.
It's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
And recognise that people are busy, that perhaps call back at another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Often you'll find that you call and you'll actually schedule a call for another time. Now you brought up the point of gatekeepers, particularly if you're talking to people who are quite high up in organisations. There's going to be an assistant or some form of gatekeeper. In that case, really you need to have a clear. You really need to know the name of who you're talking to and why. You need to be very confident when you're delivering that, and you need to be polite. And generally, as long as you don't sound unprofessional, you'll be successful in many cases to set up an appointment to talk to that person. We've done work before where we've had a client with a product that can only be sold to, let's say, 8 companies globally. And in that case, sometimes you really do need to target decision makers quite high up in the organisation.
No, that's good. Well, we're getting close to the end of time, Sean, but one of the questions that we keep getting through actually is, are we going to send out a link to the slides?
Yeah, of course. So we will be sending out this afternoon a link for you to view the slides. We'll also be uploading the video to YouTube. I'll send you a link to our YouTube channel, but that may not be ready until tomorrow or the day after. But look, you'll have the slides this afternoon. I've left my contact details up there. Please flick me an email, give me a call. I encourage you to get in touch if you want to know more about market research. And also, as I said before, that we have our inventor service, our Queensland inventor service. Look, that's available to everyone all around the country, not just in Queensland. And I would encourage you to log on to that, and I will distribute a link to that as well.
Yeah, no, it's on the chat panel there at the moment.
Oh, excellent. Great. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for attending. I think we'll end it there, and we really hope you've got something out of today, and we will see you next week for the continuation of our webinar series with Agile New Product Development.
Thank you all very much.